Okay, we are live. So it's like being under house arrest, you guys. It's crazy. Okay, the very first thing I want to show you is that I have been keeping track of your homework and your grades. Okay, so these, if you can see, most of you guys are doing all your homework. There's second period, here's fourth period, but there's a few of you that aren't doing anything, and that is definitely gonna come back to bite you. So these grades are going to go in here. Probably by the end of this week we'll be done with this chapter, so I'm kind of hoping you guys are doing this homework. Anyway, there's a little show that I am keeping track of you doing it or not doing it. Okay, so before I do anything, let's go back to last night's homework, okay? Because I don't think a lot of you really understand it, so I'm going to show it again, kind of. Okay, so here's the answers I got. So after complete the square, number one, I got x plus 6 quantity squared because the extra number is 36. Number two, the extra number is 4. So I get an x plus 2 quantity squared, okay? Number 5, I will do number 5 here in a moment. The extra number is 49 fourths, and so then it factors in x minus 7 halves. 7, after you factor it and complete the square, you get answers of 5 and 3. 9, after you complete the square and factor it, you get 3 and negative 7. 11, you get decimal answers because it doesn't work out real well, so you get a 12.8 and a negative 0.8. And 13, which I will do in a moment, it gives you an answer of 11.2 and a 0.8. And then 15, you get an answer of 9 and negative 11. On the rocket, you're not really, it's a totally different kind of problem. You're really looking for the vertex, which is the top point. You're going to use negative b over 2a. It's a different question than what we've been doing, okay? Now, real quickly, I want to do number 5 for you, so you see 5, okay? And I'm going to do number 13, then I'll turn the lesson, because I don't think you guys really, everybody understands how to do this, okay? So number 5, and this is on last night's homework 4.4, okay? So, x squared minus 7x plus something. And I got to find out what that something is in order to be able to factor this, okay? So it starts like this. B is negative 7. I'll take half of that. Well, half of negative 7 is just going to be negative 7 halves. Okay? I'm going to square that. If I square that, I'm going to get a positive 49 fourths. Okay, now that's the number that goes there. 49 fourths. This will factor. In fact, it factors like this. Okay, I'm going to go parentheses, 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 parentheses. If I need an x squared, I'm going to go x times x. And what I'm going to do is use the square root. This is going to be a 7 halves. I'm going to go minus, minus, because the negative times the negative makes the positive, and the negative plus the negative makes the negative here. But I'm going to go square root of the 7 halves. Now, if you were to go ahead and do this, the double smiley, you get 7 halves, another 7 halves, add them together, you get a 7, multiply it, you get negative 49. You can rewrite this, you can get the positive 49 fourths, x minus 7 halves squared. Okay, that was a hard one. Now, let's look at 13, another hard one. This skill you're going to need to know for sure in pre-calc, okay? And if you aren't going to pre-calc, alright, whatever, but it really makes solving some problems easier. X squared minus 12x plus 9 equals 0. Okay? I'm going to do this one for you. So first of all, you have to bring 9 over because you want just these two by themselves, because that's what you're going to factor. Okay? So I'm going to have x squared minus a 12x equals a negative 9. Now, I purposely left a little space right here, because that's what I want to find, is that number here, like I did up above. So how do I find that number? Half. Half of 12 is 6. 6 squared is a 36. So go plus 36. So again, half of 12 is 6. 6 squared is 36. I have to balance my equations. If you add 36, you've got to add 36 here. Alright, so how does that help? Well, this will factor. This will factor into an x minus 6. X minus 6 equals, oh, what's 36 minus 9? What is that, 27? Probably 36 minus 9. Yep, 27. This rewrites as an x minus 6 squared equals 27. I want to solve for x, I square root it. We'll cancel the square. And I know I'm going to have two answers because of the x squared, two answers, plus or minus. So what I do is, what's the square root of 27? I don't know. It's a calculator's going to do it. I square root of 27. My calculator says square root of 27 is about 5.2. So we're going to round it to 5.2. So we got plus or minus 5.2. The square root cancel the square, so I got an x minus 6 equals 5.2. Okay, now what I want to do with this is I'm going to go ahead and have two little mini equations. We got x minus 6 equals plus or minus 5.2, so we'll go positive 5.2, and x minus 6 equals a negative 5.2. And I'm going to solve. I'm going to go plus 6 plus 6. I'll get x equals 11.2. I'll go plus 6 plus 6. X equals a positive 0.8. Okay, so that's completing the square. Again, that's one of the skills you're going to have to learn in pre-calc again. Oh, actually, we'll do it maybe... No, we'll do it in Algebra 2 also, okay? All right, now, you ready for today's lesson? Some of you have already learned the quadratic formula, okay? So let's take a look at this. Okay, today's notes. Quadratic formula. So, if you can't factor, and if you can't get the answer, you can always use the quadratic formula. It will work on any trinomial, okay? So here it is, and you got to write this down, okay, in your notes. X equals, ready? Negative b plus or minus big square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Okay, write that down, please. Quadratic formula, you're gonna, if you take more math, you're gonna use this a lot. Mr. Massey's classes, you're gonna use this all the time. They don't allow calculus, so you have to do this, or fancy calculus. So here's how it works. If you want to solve any ax squared plus bx plus c equation, right? Okay. As an example, let's say we want to solve a x squared plus a 2x minus 3 equals 0. And if you don't know how to factor, then you can use the quadratic formula. If it doesn't factor, then you have to use the quadratic formula. Now this one will factor, and I picked one that will factor because I want to show you with nice numbers how this works, okay? So, how does the quadratic formula work? So first of all, a is 1, b is 2, c is negative 3. I'm going to write that down. Okay, I want to write that down on the side. Okay, a is 1, b is 2, and c is negative 3. A is always the number in front of the x squared, b is always the number in front of x, and c is just the number by itself. Okay, don't write the x's, just the numbers. Just the numbers, not the x's. Okay, so we are going to plug these numbers into our formula. Okay, all right, so we're going to have negative b, so we're going to put a negative 2 right here. We're going to go negative 2, because b is negative 2, plus or minus, because there are two answers. The big square root of b squared, so I'm going to take 2 squared, minus, in the formula, 4 is in the formula, it's always there, 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is a negative 3, all over 2 times a, and a is 1. Alright, let's see if we can get our answers, okay? Let's go ahead and work on this. So, I'm going to go, and you're going to need to use lots of paper, negative 2, plus or minus. So I'm going to do a little simplification of what's inside, okay? So that's 4 minus 4 times 1 times 3 is 12, but I got a negative times a negative makes a positive 12. Okay? 4 times 1 times 3 is 12, but a negative times negative is a positive, all over 2a, which is times 2. Okay? Now, let's keep going. I'm going to do more work with what's inside. So I'll have a negative 2 plus or minus 4 plus 12 is 16 all over 2. All right, let's keep going. I know the square root of 16 is 4, so I'm going to have 2 plus or minus 4, because the square root of 16 is plain old 4 all over 2. Now, there are two answers. There are two answers. Okay, so one answer is 2 plus 4 divided by 2. 2 plus 4 divided by 2. And the other answer is 2 subtract 4 divided by 2. 2 subtract 4 divided by 2. So there are two answers. Okay, this is 6 over 2, which is 3. Okay, this is a negative 2 over 2, which is a negative 1. There's my answers. Okay. Now, somebody would have said, hey, Mr. Davies, doesn't that factor? And I'd say, yes, that's why we learned factoring. It's so much easier. I could have factored that into x. I could use a plus 3 and a minus 1, which would be much faster. That's why we learn factoring, because it's so much easier with factoring. Okay, so you can use the quadratic formula. Now, I had a kid named Avery about 4 or 5 years ago. A kid, he said, I hate factoring. I will never learn factoring. So once I taught him this, he was like, yeah, I like the quadratic formula because I can always get the answer. Okay, let's turn the page and try another. Okay, now, example 2. Let's do it again. X squared plus 3x minus 5 equals 0. Okay, now I'm going to solve for x. This one does not factor. Bummer. If it factored, it'd be easy. Just factor it to get the answer. But we can use our quadratic formula. Okay, so a is 1, b is 3, c is negative 5. Here's our formula. I'll write it down again so we can see it. Negative b plus or minus big square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, that's our quadratic formula. I just rewrote it again so that we can use it. All right, here's my a, b, and c. And if I get going too fast, don't forget, just pause it. Okay, so let's plug the numbers in. Okay, so negative b. So I'm going to go, all right, negative. And if b is negative, I get a negative negative. I hope everybody understands that. We'll look at one of those here in a bit. Okay, so I'm going to go negative b. So we're going to negative 3 plus or minus big square root of b squared, which is a 3 squared minus 4 times, because 4 is always in 4, a times 1 times c, which is a negative 5. All over 2 times a, and a is 1. Okay, so just put the numbers into the formula. That's all you got to do. Okay, now we got to simplify. I'm going to go negative 3 plus or minus big square root of 9, because 3 squared, and then 4 times 1 times 5 is 20, but a negative and a negative makes a positive 20, all over 2 times 1 is 2. Okay. All right, let me keep going. I'm going to go negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 29 over 2. Okay, now, here's the problem. Square root of 29, it's not a good number, so I use my calculator. Okay, square root of 29, and I get a decimal answer of about 5.4. Round to the nearest tenth is easiest. 5.4. So I'm going to square root of 29 is about 5.4. So let's go negative 3 plus or minus 5.4 over 2. There are two answers. I know there's two answers because it's an x squared. So I go negative 3 plus 5.4 over 2. Negative 3 plus 5.4 over 2, and I'll go negative 3 subtract 5.4 over 2, so I go negative 3 minus a 5.4 over 2. Alright, so then I'm just going to use my calculator and figure that negative 3 plus 5.4, let's see, that's a 2.4 over 2, which gives me an answer of a 1.2. There's one answer. That's a negative 8.2 0.4 divided by 2, which gives me a negative 4.2. Okay, there you go. Okay, I got one more example. Okay, I want you to see this one that happens. Okay, all right, now again, you can always pause the video if I'm going too fast. Okay, last example. All right, now I've got a 2x squared minus a 1x plus 7 equals 0. Okay, so let's do it. A is 1, B is negative 1, and C is 7. Okay, again, I'll write the formula for us so we don't have to look it up, but it's negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That's my quadratic form, okay? Pause the video anytime you need to and restart it, but I'm just going to keep cruising on because you guys can pause. Okay, A is 2. Oh man, almost made a mistake. A is 2, B is negative 1, and C is 7. Okay, so let's plug them in. So, negative B, so I'm going to have a negative, negative 1. So I'm going to have a negative, negative 1, double negative, plus or minus, big square root of a negative 1 squared minus 4 times A, which is 2, times C, which is 7, all over 2 times A, which is 2. All right, double negative, so you have to be careful. Okay, plugged everything in, double negative, because I got a minus a negative 1. So a double negative is positive 1, plus or minus, big square root, negative 1 squared. Negative 1 times negative 1 is a positive 1, minus, let's see, 4 times 2 is 8, times 7 is 56, minus 56, all over 4. All right, 2 times 2, okay? Keep going. Okay, 1 plus or minus square root of a negative 55 over 4. Okay, now, problem. Oops. Let's give a smiley face, frowny face. Uh-oh, we got a problem. We're going to have a square root of a negative number. Okay, let's check this out. So what does that mean? Okay, if I go square root of negative 55, I get non-real. So what this tells me is I am done. That's actually not such a bad frowny face. It's a good frowny face because we're done. There is no solution. So here's what happens. If we get a inside, we have a square root of a negative number, no solution. If we get the square root of a positive number, there's going to be 2 answers. And you'll see if you get the square root of 0, there will be 1 solution. Graphically, it looks something like this. You could have one parabola that looks like this. Never crosses the x-axis. You could have another parabola like this. It crosses it twice, we get 2 answers. And then finally, you could get a parabola that looks like this and touches it in one spot, 1 solution. Okay, so homework for today. We're going to go to page 133. I need you to show your work. You're probably going to need to do this on a separate sheet of paper, okay? So we're going to go to 133, page 133 in your journal, and I want you to do page 133 and 134. I'd like you to do 115 odd. Okay, and I would probably suggest graph a separate sheet of paper. You're never going to be able to fit all this in here, okay? So don't do 2, don't do 4. A is 1. So I want by the quadratic formula, okay? You're going to need a piece of scratch paper to do this. On number 5, you've got to bring the 7 back over. You've got to go plus 7 before you even do it. So you have a negative 3x squared plus a 5x minus 6 equals 0. Then start the quadratic formula. And number 7, I kind of set it up here. You got a square. I would do this differently. I wouldn't even use the quadratic form. I would do it this way. And I would square root it. But I'll let you guys look at that, okay? 9, number of solutions. When you do the quadratic formula, again, if you get show you my notes. If you get a negative square root, no solutions. If you get a positive square root, 2 answers. And if you get 0, you get 1 solution, okay? And then 15, do it any way you like. For instance, I'd probably factor it. It'd probably be easier. X, I'd factor it. So much easier than using the quadratic formula if it does factor. Okay, you will need to use scratch paper. I'm sure of it, to show your work. So, email me, text me, whatever, okay?